for somebody who loves Star Wars, who cosplays, who collects the toys, who's into the movies, I mean, that day was, if I died the next day, I would have been happy.
The day you probably got on set and put your costume on for the first time, like that must have been probably the most magical moment ever.
I cried. It was every nerd's dream. And she calls me up and she says, so Lucasfilm called and they want to know what your availability is. And I was just like, you're kidding me. I knew it was a big step, but I didn't realize how much of an impact being in Star Wars was going to mean for me, not only personally, but professionally. Just to be sitting in a fully actualized X-Wing cockpit in full costume, and you're there. I've fantasized about being in that position ever since I was 5. I'm beside myself. I'm like, what is my life right now?
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Vader's Order podcast. Today we have an amazing guest, Paul Sun-Hyung Lee, and you might know him as the iconic Carson Teva. How are you today, Paul?
I'm well, thanks. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
No, thank you so much for joining. Yeah, just to take it like a little bit step backwards and going back within your career and where Star Wars began for you. Were you always a fan of Star Wars, or was this introduced to you, when you got the role of Carson Teva in The Mandalorian? Because you were season 2, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's right. No, I've been a fan since I was 5 years old. I saw Star Wars in the movie theater. My dad took my sister and I to see it, and fell in love with it then. And it's been a lifelong passion of mine and love of mine. And so when I landed the role in Mandalorian, it's a dream come true. So it's one of those impossible things that you never think is ever going to happen. And when it did, I'm still in disbelief at times. I had a lot of pinch me moments for sure. Every time I go on set, I keep thinking there's no way it could possibly get any nerdier or any greater than it can, and it does. And so I count myself to be very, very fortunate to not only be living out my dreams, but to be able to share that with countless of others, because I've had a lot of fans come up to me and they're cheering me on and rooting me on, and I'm more than happy to share my experiences for them, because it's like, the way it's been explained to me, it's like one of us got in. And so it's a really, really amazing thing, that I am just really beside myself at times that I'm there. And Star Wars has done so much for me for so long, and to be part of it and to sort of give back a little bit to the community means a lot.
Yeah. So growing up, like you said, you were always a fan of it. Did it influence your acting career, wanting to start acting, or was that like totally separate?
It's one of those things where I didn't even know I could be an actor growing up. I mean, for sure, it developed a sense of a passion for storytelling in me.
Yeah.
I loved the story of Star Wars. I played with the action figures. I created my own adventures in terms of like either playing with Lego pieces or action figures, or all the play sets, or with friends in the playground. Recreating little moments to fanfic, like writing little short stories about it, reading the comic books. All those things really ignited a sense of storytelling in me, and I love that sort of craft. But I didn't realize I could be an actor growing up, just because immigrant parents, and acting is not even on the radar. It's like doctor, teacher, lawyer, or engineer, right? Like those things. And the other thing was I just didn't see a lot of Asians in the entertainment industry. So it just didn't seem like a viable sort of option even. And when I discovered in university that I could actually take acting courses, I mean, that was the straw that broke the camel's back, because I found something that I needed to do. Not only wanted, but I needed. Every fiber of my being wanted to be an actor at that moment, so I could just tell these stories or be involved in telling these stories. And it was... Yeah, I mean, it's like when you discover something that you're truly, truly passionate about, and it runs parallel to the stuff that you grew up with, and you suddenly realize, oh, I can do the same thing as these other people whose work I admire, whose stories that they tell. I could be part of that. Cool. Not really thinking that I could be part of Star Wars. You know? I mean, Star Wars was still always like, it might as well be on the moon or Mars. So out of reach. It's there. We can study it. We can watch it. But Star Wars is always something that was just so much bigger than life. So, you kind of go, baby steps, and you start off, you get a little acting gigs here or there, but never once realizing that I could be in a Star Wars. So yeah, I mean, tangentially, Star Wars, yeah, it sort of helped shape my love for storytelling. But I don't think really I set out to be an actor because of Star Wars.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And I like what you say when you say, like, it's like, oh, one of us made it or something like that, because it's like, it is what you say. It's like when you're watching the films, you always think to your head, like when you're watching, it's like, it's so far away. It's like, and it literally is like its own galaxy. You don't even think about that stuff. So for you, I mean, I'm sure like the day you probably got on set and put your costume on for the first time, like that must have been like probably the most magical moment ever.
I cried.
Really?
I mean, I cried. I don't know how many times I cried that day.
Yeah.
It was just because it's so surreal, like I said, even when I became a professional actor,
Mm-hmm.
I'm working in Canada, and I'm far away from Hollywood, but I'm doing work that I'm proud of. I'm making money. I'm making a living. I'm honing my craft. I'm learning. I'm growing as a professional. And but Star Wars is always still. It's like, well, that's Star Wars.
Yeah.
They shoot that in Europe, right? In the UK, all the movies are shot over there. They use American stars. They use UK actors. There aren't very many Canadians in Star Wars type thing. And so you kind of go, okay, well, my career is running parallel to all these things. We're doing the same job. It's just like, I'm not doing these big, huge projects. And so, it's a weird thing when you suddenly find yourself thrust into these types of shows, right? And Star Wars was the first big show that I got to do. And in terms of what it does for your career and I knew it was a big step, but I didn't realize how much of an impact being in Star Wars was going to mean for me, not only personally, but professionally. Because all of a sudden it's like, for lack of a better term, it's sort of like, I'm going to use baseball as an analogy. You play Little League, you step up, you do travel ball, you play at an elite level, you play at high school, university, or college or whatever, and then you play in the minors. You're doing good in the minors, you're doing okay, and then suddenly you get a call to the big leagues. And that's kind of what Star Wars is. You get up to the bigs, all these eyeballs are on you, and you're stepping onto like a world stage. And it is something that is, because it's such a huge fan base and because it means so much to a lot of people, there is that pressure to do well, to show that you belong up there, and to not only be a fan, but show that you are a professional at your craft. You got to do the job. You got to do it well enough so that the fans believe in you and you help serve the story and serve the vision of the directors and the story writers and everybody involved. That's the biggest thing. It's just like, you don't think it's going to happen till it happens. And when it's there, you can't believe it. And it's another level, right? So,
yeah. And honestly, not only that, but it was a huge deal as well, because The Mandalorian was the first live action, not only live action show, but it basically was like the launch of Disney Plus as well. And what you mean about all the eyeballs, it skyrocketed. It blew up instantly. It was amazing. How did you get the role? Did you have to audition?
No, it's so funny. So I was on a show called Kim's Convenience in Canada, and it was a big hit in Canada, but pretty much localized to Canada. We were released on Netflix the first couple of seasons, and the show did okay. The show was doing okay on Netflix, and it got a bigger audience, but didn't really explode until the pandemic, unfortunately, because that's when it kind of became everybody's sort of comfort show, and then that's when it became viral, and everybody was word of mouth, and that's when Kim's really exploded. But before then, it was making waves in the Asian community, because it was a representation of an Asian family and an Asian immigrant family in Canada. And this family was portrayed in a very realistic sort of manner, even though it was a sitcom. We weren't caricatures. We were actual characters with, hopes, fears, and our flaws and whatnot. And it was a really, really great sort of heartwarming family show that people of all ages could enjoy. And that's kind of rare when you can have little kids and older people get together and enjoy the same show. And it was something for everybody. It really is special. Anyways, I was in that show, and we were down in Los Angeles in 2018. And we were invited down there as part of the Unforgettable Gala, which is a celebration of Asian Americans in the media. And I'd been invited alongside with the rest of the cast. And while I was down there at the Beverly Hilton, this woman jumped in front of me. And she said, "Hey, Paul, do you remember who I am?" And that woman was Deborah Chow.
Oh,
Now,
go
Deborah,
ahead.
as some of you may know, she was a
Yeah.
director on the first season of Mandalorian. She went on to direct, Obi-Wan Kenobi, that
Yeah.
series. That was hers. She's been touted as somebody who's very, very, really good at what she does, especially when it comes to Star Wars. And so I hadn't seen Deb in 25 years because she is Canadian.
Right.
And back in those days, when I first met Deb, we were both working for a theater company that was going bankrupt. And that's how I got to know Deb. She was, an aspiring filmmaker. I was, an aspiring actor. And she asked me if I wanted, like way back in the day, if I wanted to be in the short film of hers. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. Sounds like fun. So I did the short film, and then she disappeared. And I didn't see her again until she jumped in front of me at the Unforgettable Gala. And turns out, I was like, Deb, of course I remember you. What's going on? How are you? And she said, oh, she got her film degree at NYU because of that short film that I was in. And then she tried to get some work in Canada as a director, wasn't getting a ton of work. So she went to the States and started working as a director in the States. And she was working on a show called The Mandalorian. Had I heard of it? And of course, I was like, oh my God, you work on The Mandalorian? Yes, absolutely, 100%. She said, well, that's great because I've been trying to get in touch with you because Dave Filoni really likes your work and he wants to write something for you. Do you know who Dave Filoni is? And I was like, yeah. I mean, Dave wasn't a household name at that point because Disney Plus hadn't launched yet. And so if you weren't a fan of the animated, Star Wars, you didn't know who Dave was. If you didn't watch the Clone Wars, if you didn't watch Rebels, you were like, Dave who? And so it was really cool because he was like one of these guys that you had to kind of have, you had to be into that sort of expanded universe to really sort of understand the players. And I was like, luckily, I was like, yeah, no, I know who Dave Filoni is. So Dave was a fan of my work in Kim's Convenience, and I got invited to a set visit for season 1 of Mandalorian. I went. I died a million deaths. It was every nerd's dream because I got to watch Deb work. I got to watch Dave work. I saw the volume. I was able to watch them film in the volume for the first time, which was just like mind blowing. I saw Grogu before anybody else did because they were shooting that scene at Pelimoto's docking bay, and I saw the puppeteers from Legacy. And I was like, what is that? Like blown away by that. Met Jon Favreau. Got a guided tour of the set and all the departments, including the costume department from Dave, had dinner with him afterwards, hung out with the props department, Josh Roth, who's the head of props there. And it was just like, for somebody who loves Star Wars, who cosplays, who collects the toys, who's into the movies, I mean, that day was, if I died the next day, I would have been happy. It just would have been like, okay, I did that. Fast forward 6 months later, and my agent gets a call from, and she calls me up and she says, so Lucasfilm called and they want to know what your availability is. And I was just like, you're kidding me. So they'd offered, it was a straight up offer. Didn't have to audition for it. And it was for this part. And they had code names for all the characters because they're very secretive. And I didn't realize this. But the code name for the character for Carson Teva was the foodie pilot. I had no idea what that meant. It was just like, I said, yes, well, absolutely. I'll take it. I don't care what it is. I'll take it. In my head, I'm like, what's a foodie pilot? Like, what is that? And I thought, oh, maybe he's an alien and he flies like a big space restaurant or something. Cause you have Dex's Diner.
I was going to say that. Yeah.
Instances in Star Wars, right? So I think, oh, you're going to be under like 30 pounds of latex and no one will recognize you, but it's cool because you'll be in Star Wars.
Yeah.
So, it's like, yes. And, got that process started. And then my agent called and said, so Jon Favreau is going to call you and he's going to explain to you what your character is, like what that is. I'm like, oh my God, Jon Favreau is going to call me. Oh, okay. That's like, that's heavy. Right. Funny story. I actually missed his first phone call because I was eating Kentucky Fried Chicken with my family. The food had just come and I wasn't like sitting there naked with a bucket of chicken.
Priorities.
I was actually, I was handing out the chicken and my phone was in my pocket. It was on silent anyways. So I remember sitting down, taking my phone out to put on the table, and I saw that I missed a phone call. It was Jon Favreau, and I thought, oh my God, what have I done? So I called him back, which was great. And we chatted. And Dave was on the line as well. And they were describing who Carson Teva was. And in fact, he wasn't an alien. They were going to see my face and that I was a rebel pilot, or I used to be a rebel pilot. And yeah, that was just like, My wife recorded that like on our end that conversation. I got the stupidest grin on my face
Aw.
throughout the whole thing, but it's just disbelief. You know,
Yeah.
you're living through a dream and you can't believe it's actually happening. It's like pinch me. You know, am I dreaming? And so that's what happened. Like I got it, and then it was like a whirlwind type um, experience because
Yeah.
uh, I got fast tracked in terms of work permits to work in the States because I am Canadian.
Mhm.
You know, Disney did that. You know, I guess when Lucasfilm or Disney says we need this guy, he's important. You know, immigration goes okay, and they gave me the stamp, and I went down to the States, and yeah, it was just like my head is still uh, spinning from all of that, and that was like, you know, almost 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Now, if you think about that, that's crazy. But I still remember all those moments. But that's how I got the gig.
That's amazing. And especially because like you said 6 months later they called you. So you didn't even
Yeah,
quote unquote have the role yet. And the fact that they let you on set, just full trust
yeah,
where like you saw Grogu, which was the biggest kept secret. Like no
yeah,
one, I mean, that's insane. That's
yeah. It was great. I
incredible.
remember seeing that too. And Dave, I was like, "What is that? Oh my god, what is that? This." I was like, "This is crazy." And I remember Dave looking at me and going, "Now, don't tell anybody." I was like, I am not going to ruin this for anybody because this
Yeah.
is going to melt the internet. Like this is crazy. And that's the hardest thing about working on a Star Wars show
Hmm.
is you can't say anything about it. I mean, and that's the thing. I don't know how many like potential nosebleeds or ear bleeds I had from like keeping my mouth shut and kind of like going and
Yeah.
hearing because you know people fans they posit their own theories. They have ideas of what they think is going to happen,
Hmm.
and it's just like some are close, some are way off. But as somebody
Yeah.
with that kind of insider knowledge and not being able to say anything, it was really really hard, right?
It's
It's
fun.
like
It's probably fun
you,
for you to like see everything. It's like, ooh, he's on the right track. No, that's completely off.
yeah,
Like that's fun.
yeah,
Did you
it is.
with like so you were so your first debut was, if I'm not mistaken, episode 2 of season 2 with
Yeah,
you were
yeah.
with Dave. Well, you were actually with Dave in that scene, which is pretty cool.
Yes.
That
So
was,
that's a cool thing. I mean, it was that episode was directed by Peyton Reed,
mm-hmm.
who directed Ant-Man. And it was also awesome because the day that I was shooting, we actually shot the episodes out of order. So my first day of
Okay.
shooting was actually for episode 4. And it was Carl Weathers, late great Carl Weathers
Oh
was the
yeah.
director for that episode. And it was the first time, that was my first gig in the US. First time acting in the US. My first director in the United States of America was Carl Weathers. Um, and yeah, a lot of firsts, a lot of great firsts. But it was like this thing where I showed up, and you know, it was a whirlwind because I landed in LA and they whisked me away from the airport before I could even check into the hotel. They brought me to wardrobe for costume fitting. I got to put on the pilot uniform that they had fabricated just for me. It was a tailor-made jumpsuit,
Yeah.
and to put on all the flak jacket, the belts, the chest box, you know, and to help wardrobe because they were having trouble with figuring out the ejection harnesses. And I cosplayed as a rebel pilot, so I was able to help them out with that and kind of go, "Hey, look, I've got
That's so
pictures on my
funny.
phone." Yeah, you know, and so it's like standing on the shoulders of giants, and like it's amazing the cosplay community because there's so much information that's being passed back and forth, and to be looped into that and able to use all this stuff that I gleaned from everybody else who went through the trials and tribulations of
Mm-hmm.
figuring out what a screen accurate look for these costumes are, and then pass them like in a full circle moment to professionals who are trying to figure it out is incredible. I mean, and that's the power of this community of cosplayers and fans, you know, at its best when it's like that free sharing of information, and then you know, and crying through all that, and then you know, going to set and having to meet. I remember there was a, you know, before I even got to go to the hotel afterwards, they said, "Oh, so they want you to go to set because JF wants to talk to you." I was like, "JF? Who's JF? What's the JF? Oh, John Favreau. Oh, cool." So going there, and John did something really classy, and I really respect. He's like, he comes in, he knew I was a big fan, and he was like, "Look, for a lot of fans, you know, people who come in like actors, they're big fans, and it gets overwhelming because you know, if you ever visit one of these sets, it's so immersive. Like I'm standing on the streets of Navarro, full out, you
Yeah.
know, people in costumes, props, you know, it's just, you're there and it is overwhelming and you're looking at it and you can't believe that you're going to be doing this. And so John gave me a tour of the entire, and we're shooting season 2 by that point, right? Like season 1 was already in the can and was being aired. Oh no, it hadn't aired yet. It was about to air. That's what it was. Oh. So we were shooting season 2 before season 1 aired. Is basically what happened.
Yeah.
And I remember that because, John gave me the nice little pep talk. He says, it gets overwhelming. I just wanted to give you a chance to sort of take it all in before you get too overwhelmed the next day. And at the end of it, he gave me this coin. It was a challenge coin. It had the Mandalorian head, and it was in the Mando script. There was stuff written on it. And so I remember going home, going back to the hotel and translating it. And it said, "This is the way." And I didn't know what that meant at the time. So this is how I know I did it before they aired season 1, because I had to figure out what "this is the way" meant. So the next day I went in and shot, met Carl. It's a whole other story around that, which is great. Nothing but fond memories of Carl. I loved him so much. He was like, he's an icon. Man's an icon. I grew up watching and admiring his work. And first time I met him, he scared the crap out of me. I'm not going to lie. Like, the man can be as intimidating AF, because he didn't know who I was. And he didn't cast me. It's this whole thing where he's directing the episode, but he didn't cast me. So he's like, "Who's this guy?" And he doesn't know if I have the chops to do it, if I'm professional. He doesn't know. And so, like, it was kind of like a birth of fire. And by the end of that first day, I think he was suitably comfortable with me. And somewhat impressed, I guess. Like, I had exceeded his expectations. And it was really, really great, because after that, he sort of relaxed around me, and we got to chatting and talking and stuff like that. And he asked me about, so what do you do? Like, what shows have you been in that I could watch? And I told him about Kim's Convenience, thinking that he's not going to watch it. But for season 3, when I came in to shoot episodes of season 3, Carl came bolting across the back lot. They're like, Paul. I thought, oh my God, he's going to kill me. He's going to come and he's going to, because he used to play football, right? He's an opposing man. He's running towards me. I'm like, what's going on? And he's all like, I watched Kim's Convenience. I loved it. You were great in that. Like, why are we not working together? And so that was, that's something I'll take with me for the rest of my days.
That's so nice.
Is that, that validation from him, because like I would have walked through a wall for Carl.
Yeah.
Like, just so inspiring, and just so, so good at his craft, and somebody who was very passionate and cared about what he was doing and wanted to do so much more, which is great, even with all that he had accomplished, and I will always admire and love him for that. But that was, this is what I'm talking about, like my experiences on The Mandalorian. I mean, and that's still like the only thing I've ever done in the States. Like, I've done some shorts, but I haven't done any other work. Like, my claim to fame is all my work in the US has been for Star Wars.
That's amazing.
That's not bad, right?
Yeah.
That's
I mean, that's a pretty cool, like, anytime I go to the States, it's, that's so cool. Like, and especially, I feel like as you're explaining your story, I feel like it progressively just gets more and more like magical in a way.
Yeah.
I
mean, that was it. Like, you were talking about episode 2, Peyton Reed, and I find out, Filoni's going to be my co-pilot, which is cool. He's my wingman, which is it's great. And it's like, yeah, okay. And then, like, we're shooting in the volume for the first time. And doing that scene, like, where, we pull over the Razor Crest, Mando stalling and whatnot. And then just to be sitting in a fully actualized X-Wing cockpit in full costume, surrounded by the volume, you've got the starfield, and you're there. I fantasize about being in that position ever since I was 5. Like, who doesn't dream about flying in a starship in the Star Wars universe if you've watched this show?
Yeah.
And there I am, in a much better designed, like, when I was a kid, I would sit in these cardboard orange crates, and I'd draw in the controls for the X-Wing, and I'd sit and I'd pretend. And so now here I am in a much better box, in a better costume, looking out and sitting there on a stage, which is cutting edge technology. And I'm beside myself. I'm like, what is my life right now?
Yeah.
And then the geniuses they call them the Genius Bar. the wizards at the Genius Bar, they suddenly hit the starfield and it starts doing this, and it feels like you're being thrown. Even though the ship is anchored firmly to the ground, you feel like you're just being thrown back and forth. I was like, whoa! And I remember Peyton said, yeah, they do that. If you get dizzy, just look down at the panel. Don't look at the stars. But that's the power of that moment. And then, doing the chase sequence where we drop back and the S foils open up and we go into attack position, and then he runs, and then we film this whole sequence in the volume of the chase through Muldo Kreese. And they didn't really use any of our cockpit stuff. They used some of the beautiful exterior shots of the X-wings chasing the Razor Crest.
Yeah.
I mean, we did a bunch of times, and every time it's like again. Like I didn't want to get out. I didn't want to get out of the cockpit, right? So, it's really everybody who works on the Star Wars set is a fan of Star Wars, and you can feel the love, the giddiness, the joy, the nerdism. Everybody's having a nerdgasm while they're doing it, right? And it's contagious. And everybody, like every time I've been on set, everybody's been having a blast doing it because it's a part of history. Yeah. Because what you do gets aired and is watched by millions of people and is scrutinized by very, very many nitpicky fans, but also celebrated by millions and millions of other fans. And, the byproduct of what you're making has a huge ripple effect that you don't really realize until you've experienced it once. And then you kind of go, oh, that is the power of Star Wars, of this world that we're helping to create stories for. And it's intoxicating. It is. It's intoxicating. So, I love talking about it. I will never not talk about it, especially people ask, and people love asking because it's everything that you hope it would be and more.
Yeah. And I feel like, honestly, when you're watching, like when you watch Mandalorian, when you watch, especially Ahsoka as well, because of all the magical creatures and planets in Ahsoka as well. One thing I'll just really, like you said, it's just that you can really see the passion that is in there, and you can tell everyone's having a good time, and you can see just like all the creativity, not just like from the actor's point of view, but also, behind the scenes and everything. When you watch like the galleries that they uploaded to Disney Plus and everything, it's just amazing.
Yeah.
So cool. And, obviously for you, the prequels were mainly all like blue screen, green screen. So the fact that you could actually sit in a cockpit, have the stars around you, it must have been amazing working in the volume, right?
It's fully immersive. I've been very fortunate in my career since then to have worked on other shows that utilize the volume as well. Really? And it's one of these things where for certain elements, I think it's spectacular. You can't beat it, right? It's totally immersive. For other elements too, there's the volume is still newish technology, and there's still sort of there's still lots of ground to break, and it's not like a be-all end-all solution to every sort of filming problem in the world. And I think it's becoming very evident that there are limitations to the volume. Much like, CG animation, like way back in the early 90s, people are like, oh my God, they've animated these fantastical creatures and blah, 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 and it's spectacular. And then once you get used to it and you start to see the little cheats and you can spot it, right? And we're getting to the point now where people are, I think, being overly critical about it because it's still freaking spectacular. But when I hear people complain, oh, it took me right out of the storytelling because I could tell it was in the volume. It's like, oh, really? You mean you didn't buy the fact that we're actually in the vacuum of space in these ships that, oh my gosh, well, it's one of those things where I think we're getting a little bit spoiled here. But that being said, there are ways that, if something's not shot properly on a volume, it can look a bit janky, right? And I think that's what it is. Like any new piece of technology, any new form of filmmaking, there are going to be some wrinkles that need to be ironed out. And we're progressing so quickly, technologically speaking, that it's hard to sort of keep up sometimes, right? Like it's a steep curve. I love working on the volume, especially if it's raining outside and you don't have to go to location, And I'm still of the mindset of I love practical effects. practical effects always look better to me. Filming on location is always going to look better, but filming on location can be very, very arduous. It can be very difficult at times.
Yeah.
I always say filming on location is like going camping. It's fun for a couple of days, but then after a while, you just want to be inside to take a dump. You know, it's just like one of those things where you miss the creature comforts
I
of
get
being
you,
in a
yeah.
studio, right?
Yeah.
And that's the thing. The volume is great because you have controllability of light. You can, you can substitute a fantastical location that doesn't exist, simply
Mhm.
put, and make it more immersive for the actors than putting up green screens or blue screens or whatever. So
Yeah.
you have those advantages, and some of the disadvantages are everything has to be pre-visualized months in advance, and sometimes
Yeah.
you're locked into these choices because of and then it doesn't give you as much flexibility if what you were hoping to accomplish doesn't quite pan out. So but again, that's the new age of filmmaking and the advantages and disadvantages of utilizing this technology. Um, uh, for me, it's always about the storytelling,
Mhm.
right? The backdrop should be immaterial. Yes, it can enhance. Yes, it can detract. But at the end of the day, if it's a really good story, you're going to be forgiving about those elements,
Yeah.
right? There are certain movies, you know, effects wise, they don't age, but story wise, they're still solid, right?
100%.
That's what we should be focusing on instead of nitpicking of little quibbly little things here or there.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's where I stand with it. But like, yeah, I mean, uh, it's fun working on a volume. It's fun being on location, not when it's raining.
Yeah. Unless you're on Camino or something like that, then it works. You know what I
Exactly,
mean?
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're in the snow, right? So
Yeah.
it is those things. It is those things. But yeah, it's just, and again, like the ability, the opportunity to have worked on cutting edge sound stages.
Yeah.
That's an incredible
Yeah.
thing that I never again thought I would have the opportunity to do.
Yeah. And I feel like that's something with Star Wars in specific, it was always ahead of its time. Like you can watch
Mhm.
the prequels, you can watch episode 3, episode 2, and you would honestly be convinced it came out 2, 3 years ago. I would still be
Yeah.
convinced. And
Yeah.
that's just a thing about like just Lucasfilm and just Star Wars. It's so generational and it's so like way beyond its time, which I always thought.
Yeah.
But besides the volume, was it like, because obviously, you did Kim's Convenience and you had so many roles throughout your acting career. Was this a very
Mhm.
different experience being in Star Wars? Just like, little things like speaking to Mando, who's just wearing a helmet and you can't even see his face, or using, these terms like alien terms. Was it like very
Mhm.
different for you?
No, not really. I
Mhm.
mean, it's at the end of the day, like the craft of acting is the same. You're doing the same thing. It's just
Yeah.
about scale,
Mhm.
right? Kim's Convenience versus Star Wars. The basic job is the same of performing, right? You inhabit a character, you make choices, you listen, and you're involved in the scene. And the choices that your character makes should influence what happens in the story and what happens with the other
Mhm.
characters. And that's storytelling, basic storytelling. Different worlds, obviously, Star Wars. But it is the thing about Star Wars that makes it easy is like I grew up with it, so it's as familiar to me as like
Yeah.
working in a convenience store, which I also did growing up, right? But it's also a sense of what I think people really love about Star Wars, even though has fantastical elements like the Force and alien races and stuff, is it feels grounded in truth. Anyways, it's a very sort of in terms of the aesthetic, it's a lived-in world, right?
Yeah.
Things aren't shiny and brand new. There are people who live in the desert who have to farm moisture,
Mhm.
right? There are people making a living out there. It's more of a fantastical element, but the basic core of it is it's a bunch of people who are in space,
Yeah.
and we are too. Like if you think about it, Earth, we are in space. You're just on a planet, right? Um, and so those truths are kind of easy to play because you're not it's not so fantastical. We use the same basic language. Their wants and desires are still there. The ability or the need to escape oppression, for equality, all
Yeah.
these things still exist, right? And so these themes are still very, very common. The dressings might be different,
Yeah.
and that might take a little bit of getting used to, but the core essence of the storytelling remains the same.
Yeah.
regardless of what kind of show you're in. And yeah, that's the thing. And for me as an actor, um, that's my job. That's my job, is to inhabit this character and to make it seem like everything is exactly as it should be, that it's normal,
Yeah.
right? Unless the script calls it for to be completely not normal, and then you can react at it that way. But yeah, the Star Wars universe for me is so, I mean, God, it's so um, detailed, and it's so rich, and there's so much to it.
Yeah.
And I'm fortunate in that, like, I keep up with the majority of what's going on. So I might not know every single little detail about it, but I can do research on it, can look that up, or I have a passing knowledge of it, or I'm deeply into that whole, like, yes, I understand. I know what this is all about sort of camp.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. And when you see it actualized physically in front of you, that's really like
Yeah.
so amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah, especially in like, having people around you to work with that are also just equally as passionate makes your job 10 times easier,
Oh yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
I mean, you
Yeah,
see someone
100%.
like someone like Dave Filoni, for example. Of course, he's, I mean, he's very much into the lore and just being able to, just nerd out and have fun. Did you have any
Yeah.
ever have any cool conversations with him about like just deep into Star Wars or anything?
We so many. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Dave, both Dave and Sean, like, they're both amazing storytellers.
Yeah.
And the thing with Filoni is, because we text each other every once in a while, and my rule with Dave is always, I try not to talk about Star Wars with him,
Yeah.
just because it's like, that's his, yes, he's an amazing storyteller, and that's his job, but that's his job type thing. I don't want to be
Yeah.
like, hey, let's talk about Star Wars, because that's all we talk about.
Yeah.
So we talk about other things too, which I hope he appreciates. I think he likes. He's a huge hockey fan, and so am I. And so, like, we chat about that. And he's got his favorite team, which is the Pittsburgh Penguins. And so, like, I like to chirp him, just like he likes to chirp me about the Toronto Maple Leafs. We tease each other online. He's a huge fan of other things as well. Like, he's a huge Godzilla fan, for example. He loves trains, especially the GO train, which is a train service in Ontario. And so he's a very well-rounded individual who has many, many other sort of likes and dislikes, like any human being. But the thing about Dave is too, like, when you do talk to him about the lore, because he is so knowledgeable, because he's made all these connections between all the characters and stuff like that, it's a treat. It really is a treat to hear him start chatting on set about, conversations he had with George Lucas,
Yeah.
little things he learned along the way while shooting, while they were filming, Clone Wars and, Rebels. It's if you've ever met Sam Witwer, he and Dave are very similar in that sense, in terms of like the deep cuts
Yeah.
into the lore and the connectivity and their knowledge of that, all of that connective tissue. It's really, really cool. And John is too. He's like one of these guys. It's like I always feel, because John is such a big guy too, right? Like, he's tall, and I've been a fan of his work forever, and I'm always kind of in awe of him, right? Like, a little bit of hero worship. With Dave, it's because when we met, he's just kind of like, hey, he's very Canadian. I'll say Dave is one of the most Canadian Americans I've ever met. Just, it's because of the hockey thing, and because he's just so, like, grounded, and he's just like, well, whereas John is, I remember just being like, oh my God, that's Jon Favreau. And he is, when I was in university, Swingers was my anthem. Like, that movie spoke to me on so many different levels. And the storytelling, and watching his career and watching his acting performances, and then when he stepped into directing and all the shows that he did and the movies, and what a personal sort of journey that he had as well. And now, the man who is like, had his hand in the launching of the Marvel Cinematic Universe with the rebirth of Iron Man, and the cutting edge technological advances that have been made in the industry because of initiatives that he has pushed.
Yeah.
And then him, having a hand in launching Disney Plus, and finding out that he's a nerd about Star Wars too, and John's very down to earth too. But John is, he's a bit more like a kid. Like, he loves showing off the stuff too. Like,
Yeah.
but not to like, oh, I'm going to show, like, it's like, hey, you want to see something really neat? And he's like excited to show you this nerdy stuff.
Yeah.
And so, like, I always say to Favreau, it's like, man, every time I meet you, you show me the coolest shit. And so like, Skywalker Ranch, him sort of he was able to work out that we got like a private tour of the facility and stuff like that, and it was just like, oh my god. And then we're back at the main house. Tech house says, oh, have you seen the theater downstairs? I was like, there's a theater downstairs. Like, oh, come on, follow me. And like, we're like trucking downstairs. It's just him and me, and he shows me this incredible like four or 600 seat theater downstairs. Like, it's huge, and it's a full ass theater. It's like, how does this fit underneath? It's like the TARDIS, right? Like, how is this downstairs from? But that's John. Like, that's the whole thing. And I just wish I wasn't so tongue tied around him, because I would love to just sit and have I'd love to go out and just like, have a drink with him and have a nice meal and just shoot the shit with him.
Yeah.
Because he's that kind of guy. He's that guy where you go, yeah, he'd be awesome to just, do this thing with. But I'm always very like it's just like, it's when you meet your crush, it's kind of like you're looking down and it's like, oh man, I can't say nothing. It's like, you're so awesome, right? That's how I always feel around Favreau. So it's
getting butterflies. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's just like, oh my god, he's talking to me and he's showing me all this stuff, and this is so cool. Oh my god. And it's just like, I just don't want to make an ass of myself, like gushing and stuff, right? And he's just so chill.
Yeah.
And I love that. I think it's one of those things. So it's like, I'm so happy that everybody that I met in that universe has been so amazing. From the performers to the producers to the directors to the heads of departments, everybody involved is just so enthusiastic about what they are doing. And it's like, there's not one like sort of like, yeah, this is my kid. This is a living. This is what I do. Like the jaded sort of cynic.
Yeah.
It's like, whatever. They're all in it. Yeah. And it's been really cool. It's been like, yeah. I mean, I still don't believe it. My son doesn't believe it when I come back from a con and go, oh, I did a panel with Giancarlo Esposito and Katie Sackhoff and Emily Swallow. And, he's like, what? What? It's like, what do you mean? I was like, I don't know either. Like, I just show up and I feel like, one of these things is not like the other, which one of these things does not belong. And so, but I have to remind myself too, that as much of a fanboy as I am, it's like, I didn't just get asked because I like the cosplay and because, I'm a crafted actor. Yeah. Like I'm an award-winning actor. Like in Canada, I've won like our version of the Emmy 4 times. So it's just like, I got to give myself a little bit of street cred too. And the fact that I think Carson Teva initially was supposed to be, he's just this guy, maybe a 1-off or 2-off or something. And they liked my work enough that they kept asking me back, and they keep giving me a little bit more to do, a little bit more. And so it's like, to be on the Mandalorian and then the Book of Boba Fett and now with Ahsoka, it's just like, there's only one other character who's done that whole, thing. And that's like Ahsoka Tano.
Yeah.
Right.
Literally.
That's rarefied air, right? To be part of that. And never, again, I keep saying this, never in a million years did I think that this 2-episode little mini arc where I'm just blink and you miss me would turn into this. I mean, and I gotta giggle. You said the iconic Carson Teva.
Yeah, no, he is. I mean, yeah.
I appreciate that, but it's like, really? I'm happy to be there. Really happy to be there, but
because like when I saw him in Ahsoka, I was like, wait, because it was such a nice surprise as well. Because like one thing with your character specifically, like I really loved him in season 2, but like more and more, you just saw him as like the cool, like, I don't know, like the cool cop or something like that. You know what I mean? Like just the cool guy that's just like, you know what I mean? And like, especially during that Coruscant scene when you were like kind of really defending like Navarro and everything, I was just like, yeah, like I really like this character a lot. And Ahsoka just, the humor with Hera and stuff like that, it just brought it even higher. It was just amazing.
Thank you.
So you had no idea that you were going to come back and for more and more?
No, and that was it. I mean, it was the whole, when it was done, I was like, wow, that's like, I can't talk about this. So it almost feel like it didn't happen.
Right.
And it took close to a year and, couldn't say anything. could not say anything. It was just so, and then, you know, as time goes on and passes,
Mhm.
and it's not like I can share photos. It's not like I took any photos, right? Like there's no almost like no visual evidence of me being there
Yeah.
except in my head. And then you start thinking, was that real? Oh, and then
Yeah.
you just forget about it until season 2. And then, you know, there's, you know, I remember they cut a trailer, and it was my voice
Mhm.
that they used in the trailer. And, oh my God, that's me. I can't
That's
say
so
anything,
cool.
but I
Yeah.
want to say something. Like, oh my God, oh my God. It's just like, that was hard. And then it becomes real again. And then you're
Yeah.
just sort of sitting on pins and needles because I didn't know how it was going to turn out. I didn't know how it looked. I hope they didn't suck in it, you know? And it was just all these things. Yeah, again, it's one of those things where, um, yeah, I remember at the very beginning, I didn't want the fans to turn on me. You know, it's one of those things
It's
where the fans can be the best thing,
Mhm.
but a small subsect of them can be
Mhm.
the worst thing either.
Yeah.
I'm reminded of the way poor Kelly Marie Tran
Yeah.
was treated. There's many instances of a very vocal minority, and I strongly believe it is a minority of fans
Yeah.
who behave really poorly. The treatment of Ahmed Best,
Yeah.
Jake Lloyd. I mean, it's a dark spot on the fandom of Star Wars. I
Yeah.
mean, and if you go acknowledge the good, you have to acknowledge the bad as well. And I think the majority of Star Wars fans are excellent. There are a few who call themselves fans. I mean, and that truly is a dark
It's
side right there. Yeah,
Yeah.
fans. They call themselves fans,
Yeah.
but they want to do nothing but spread their own sort of vitriol because it
Yeah.
basically boils down to I wouldn't have done it that way. In which case, by all means, make your own,
Mhm.
and then put it out there and see what it's like to get criticized
Yeah.
like that. Anyways, I'm gonna get off my soapbox for that, but
Oh, no,
that
I
was
love it.
a
Yeah.
fear.
Yeah. No, you 'cause you
Thanks,
nailed it.
but thank you. But that's a fear. That was a legit fear, and
Yeah.
I'll admit, man. Like I look at comments. I never respond to them because I
Yeah.
never fuel that fire because the best way to kill a troll is not to feed it.
Yeah.
But, you know, I'm human, so I'll look and see, "Ooh, what do people think?" And there were a few really nasty comments out there. But then I look at it and I look at the profiles and go, "Oh, you're a very sad, angry individual who's super jealous."
Yeah.
Like, and that's those things. And it's like, at the end of the day, I kind of go, "Well, I got to live my dream." And that can be really hard for people who are in a situation where they are constantly either
Yeah.
feeling belittled or not being able to do whatever, and they're
Yeah.
stuck and they just want to lash out. And then they see somebody who's doing what they've always wanted to do. And so they're going to
Yeah.
lash out. So I don't take it. I've learned not to take that kind of stuff personally. And if
Yeah.
somebody wants to make it personally and I don't know them, like I honestly don't care because it's like,
Yeah.
well, I don't know you. So, and at the end of the day, I'm on Star Wars and you're not. So
You nailed it exactly. I mean, and
what are you
honestly,
going to do? Right? So,
exactly what you said though. It's like I do think, and that's just like, well, the impression you made earlier of one of them was perfect, by the way, the little voice
well,
impression. But no, you nailed it. It's like it is a small minority. They tried
mhm,
to attempt to make themselves feel like the majority, but in reality, it
right.
is just a small portion. And I feel like, you know, as long as you and obviously the rest of the cast can just always remind yourselves of like why you're doing this and like what it means to just millions and millions of people.
Mhm.
It's inspiring, and your story specifically after learning it so far today, it's inspiring, and it makes a lot of people think, you know, at least for myself, it's like wow, like that dream, like it can come true, you know, for some, you know, and it's beautiful. um
Yeah.
yeah, no, that's amazing. Now you're not only, so you said, you mentioned you cosplayed, you also
Mhm.
collect a lot, don't you?
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
amazing. I saw the Hot Toys collection.
Yeah. Oh, I do. Is it a problem if you admit it?
Oh,
I
it's the
have
best
a
problem.
lot of yeah, I have a
Yeah.
lot of hot toys. I'm well over 100 now.
Oh, damn.
And the majority of them are Star Wars. I'm going to
Yeah.
say 97%.
Yeah.
There's a couple I've had to justify by saying like, no, I got to stay in my lane. If I go outside of Star Wars, I'm doomed. But there's a few that have just sort of like, oh, I got to, I
Yeah.
can't, but, you know. But I am an avid collector.
Mhm.
I used to collect when I was younger. There's a
Yeah.
whole story behind that too. And like when I went off to university, my parents got rid of my collection because I was
No.
away from home. Yeah.
Oh, I'd lose
So
it.
yeah, it hurt. That hurt. But you know, yeah. Anyways, it's cool because like I've been able to rebuild my collection, and now with the sweet TV money that I've been getting, it's been it's kind of been fun. It's been liberating that way, and I know
Yeah.
I'm very fortunate. I mean, I never buy anything at the expense of like stuff like bills and mortgages and my children's educational funds or whatever. Like I work really hard,
Yeah.
and so I want to be able to enjoy
Yeah.
some of the fruits of my labor. And one of the things that I enjoy doing is collecting. So I collect a lot of Star Wars stuff. I'm into like as well like collecting premium lightsabers,
Oh,
right?
that's
Like
so
replica
cool.
lightsabers, which is great. I've got a few blasters. And again, I collect helmets as well. So different helmets, different characters. Um, yeah, it's a lot. And there's another brand called, Micro Galaxy Squadrons. And so like I love the ships.
Yeah.
So I collect all the ships, diecast models of them, and also the plastic ones. I like the fleet build. Yeah, no, it's just that's my jam. It's one of those things where I just yeah, I really
We
enjoy
need
doing.
we need a Carson Teva Hot Toys. Like we
Hey,
need it.
I'll settle for like a TVC or a Black Series Hasbro. I am looking at you. What is the deal with that? I don't know how much more I can do, or Carson Teva can do. He's 3 different series. Come on, man, Hasbro, what's going on? We get somebody like, and no shade towards the actor, but like someone like the Mandalorian judge who's in like 30 seconds of season 3, who just goes point and he gets a fig. I understand it's a Mandalorian. You've got the molds. It's just the repaint, but still, they just released the E-wing from Ahsoka.
Yeah.
Lieutenant Callahan, again, great actress, I'm sure. In it for maybe 30 seconds again. And I get it. You need a pilot for an E-wing. I get that. I totally get that. But come on, show some love for Carson.
That's what I
Right?
mean.
Show
Yeah.
some love for Carson.
I put you full screen, so on the edit, I'll put you full screen right
Oh,
there, so everyone can see it. At Hasbro. No, but you did get a helmet though, which was pretty cool. That was awesome.
I did. Yeah, no, and
Yeah.
it's great. That's awesome. And I remiss to point out that Gentle Giant actually released a 1/6 scale bust of
I saw
Carson
that.
Teva.
Yeah.
It looks great. I
Yeah.
love the sculpt of it. It looks fantastic. Kudos to them for doing that. That's the first bit of really licensed sort of likeness
Yeah.
of my character. I have a Topps trading card
Oh, that's
that
cool.
when it
Yeah.
came out, Topps reached out and said, "Hey, can you autograph something? We'd love to offer that." And so like my character's in heavy rotation
Yeah.
for the Topps Star Wars trading series, which is great. So there are, yeah, I mean, it's really cool to be canon.
Yeah.
That's
Oh
really
my
like
gosh.
something,
Yeah.
you're canon now, baby. And it's like, oh my God, I'm canon. So yeah, check that off the sort of bucket list of
Yeah.
things. Um and yeah, and doing cons and seeing people cosplay as my character.
Yeah.
It's inspiring. It's inspiring, right? For you know, for people when you see that your character resonates with people, that they want to dress up like you.
Yeah.
And for the for the husky middle-aged Asian dude who's like wants that representation, they come up and say, I got the perfect costume I can cosplay as. And when you go, guy, it's
Yeah.
it's great. It's really great.
You've been to tons of conventions over the last like year or 2 years, right? Roughly.
Yeah.
Do you
This year's been super busy for that. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any like favorite memories from any of them? Like anything that really stuck out to
Oh,
you?
they're all starting to like honestly, they're all really great. They all
Mhm.
start to blend in after a certain
Yeah.
point. Just because the experience is universal in terms of how awesome they are. I've been lucky enough to be I've been to GalaxyCon
Yeah.
a bunch of times this year, and it's the same people that run the con. You say a lot of the
Right.
same volunteers. which is wonderful. So we were in Richmond, Virginia, doing that, and then we did Raleigh, North Carolina. Sadly, I had to pull out of. There's going to be one more that I was going to go to, which is Columbus, Ohio. I was really looking forward to that, but work has taken me away from there, so I've had to sort of withdraw from that one. I was really looking forward to that. But for me, the cons, the most important thing about the cons that I love so much are the fans and the people that run the cons, because they're fans too.
Yeah.
And GalaxyCon, I really, really enjoy being there because they treat the volunteers like gold. They treat the celebrities and their guests like gold. And it really means a lot because it is a privilege to be invited to these events. Yeah. And as a fan, I've been to many cons as well. And I know I can connect, like I understand, I can empathize with what the fans want. Yeah. Because that's at the end of the day what I wanted as a fan. And so I'm very, very cognizant about that. And what I love, I mean, it's you can joke and say, well, it's really hard to hear people talk about how much they love your work. And that is amazing. It is amazing to get that validation, but there's also a lot of emotionality that's involved in there too, because people talk about how much a show means to them or your character means, and you're taking that energy, which is great. But over the course of 10 hours that you're there and you're meeting a lot of people, it depletes your social battery, right? And because you want to give back as much as you're getting too, right? And I'm really sort of quite endeared to the fact that people get very, very emotional, and it means so much to them that you're at the con or you're in the show and you're taking time to say hi to them and whatnot. It is like that's the experience that I want to give back to people who make their take the time and spend the money to go out to this con, to wait in line to chat with you for a few minutes. I want to give them the best experience ever. So that's the amazing thing. And what I love about cons as well is you get to meet some amazing people there, fans, but celebrities as well. Giancarlo Esposito, Emily Swallow, Katie Sackhoff, Sam Witwer, Ted Raimi, wonderful man. I got to meet, some of the cast members from What We Do in the Shadows. So as a fan, I'm backstage too, and I'm nerding out over who's there as well, which is really, really great. And Carl was at a con. We did Winnipeg Comic Con together. That was the last time I saw him. So, to be able to have dinner with him and stuff, it's just, and to do the panels and to answer questions for fans and have a lot of fun doing it, because all these cons are really celebrations of the things that we love on the shows that we watch. And that feeds my soul. It's a lot of hard work, but it's something that I really, really love doing. So big shout out to the people who do the con, like the fans, the volunteers, the organizers. Phoenix Fan Fusion was amazing. I did Motor City Comic Con. That was great. It's just, I'm living the dream. To be able to do stuff like that as a nerd and a geek, it's just like, oh God, these are the fruits of everything that are blooming from, and Star Wars has a large part to play with it, as does Kim's Convenience, as does Avatar: The Last Airbender, right? It's just this whole confluence of fandoms and people who are passionate about what they watch.
And while you're traveling and going to these conventions in the meantime, I mean, you can be collecting your Hot Toys collection more and more, just expanding it.
No, I can't because I have going there. I can't because I got to bring stuff back, and that's the other thing too. That I often get gifts from a lot of fans who are wonderful, and it's just trying to pack it all and bring it back, which is very, very difficult, right? So I just think I've got my suppliers, and I order online, and so I'm good.
So and like you mentioned, like because like you got a. Obviously with Giancarlo, because you didn't, if I'm not mistaken, I don't think you ever got a scene with him. Obviously you spoke about his character. You never got a scene with him. And it's really nice probably for you to, I do believe you had a scene with Katie Sackhoff in the...
really briefly.
Yeah, when you arrived on the... Yeah,
she wasn't there. She sort of walked out at the end.
Right.
Which is, and same with Emily. Like as the armorer, never chatted with that. But here I am tangentially, like we're all on the same show, which is hilarious. But I've never had any scenes with them.
Right. But and at these conventions, you got to actually develop these like relationships with the people you wouldn't normally hang out with, and even from other shows, like especially, from the other Star Wars shows that are, in the Mandoverse right now and everything, which is amazing.
100%, right?
Yeah. Would you say out of like your time working on Mandalorian, Ahsoka, Book of Boba Fett, was there a memory specifically on set that really stuck out to you, whether it was like a funny memory or like just like magical or just something that really stuck out to you?
Yeah, there's so many.
Yeah, I
Like
bet.
honestly, and like I said about every time it's like I go to set,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, what could possibly be top this, right? Um, Couple of stories jump out. One which will, it happened on Ahsoka,
Right.
and I remember we were showing up, and we were shooting the courtroom scene,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of fantastic actors involved, and Genevieve Riley is there playing Mon Mothma. It's like, oh
Yeah.
my god! And this is before Andor came out, right? So it's just like she's great. It's like, oh my gosh. Um, and I remember Dave coming up to me saying, "Huh? Did you read the script?" Right, a little side. So yeah. C-3PO was in it. I was like, yeah, cool. Me thinking that it was going to be another actor in the costume, and then
Yeah.
Anthony Daniels would do the voiceover. I didn't realize that Mr. Daniels wants to be in the suit, right? Like
Oh,
he wants to do
yeah.
the whole thing. And he's in his 70s. He's in
Yeah.
incredible shape too, right?
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's him. I'm like, oh my God. Like I'm dying because like that's Star Wars royalty.
Yeah, that
This is
is. Yeah.
an actor that was at, at the very beginning and it's continued to be in every single, I think he's in all the movies. So it's like, oh my gosh. So I remember we were doing a blocking rehearsal and he shows up and he's not in costume, but he's doing the physicality of it. And he's doing the voice. And Nelson Lee, who's playing Senator Ziono, who's just killing it, by the way. He's doing a scene. He's like sort of browbeating. He's saying like, we can't accept a testimony from a droid and blah, 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 blah. He's going on and C-3PO comes in. You could hear a pin drop.
Yeah.
Everybody was around just watching him do his work.
Yeah.
And he stops and complete silence. And Anthony Daniel goes, I believe it's your line. We were so caught up in what he was doing, like we just lost track of, oh, it's a scene. We got to keep doing that. And so we burst out laughing. But the biggest takeaway from that was at the end of the day, Anthony Daniels said, I'm going to get back into the costume. And it's very uncomfortable, right? Like it's you can't see, you can barely walk in it. Like it's very difficult to be in. He said, please let the crew know, cast and crew know that, I'm going to get back into the costume. And if people want to, they can come and have a picture taken with me in costume. The only thing I ask is you just don't post it to social media. And he did that. And I thought, how incredibly classy and generous that is for a man of his stature. Like he doesn't have to, this Anthony Daniels. He doesn't have to do that. But he willingly gets into the costume and gives back to the people that he's working with. And I loved his demeanor on set because he was very, very thankful to be there still.
Yeah.
There was no arrogance. There was no entitlement. There was no, don't they know who I am or what I've done? He was just so very like happy to be there.
Yeah.
And that's such a great example of what the set usually is like on there. Everybody's happy to be there. Everybody wants to give back. And I just sort of thought that for me was the cat's ass. Like I loved what he did. And then that he didn't want any credit for it. He didn't want anybody to share that, that he was doing that. So I'm sorry, Mr. Daniels, if you're listening to this, I just outed you on that, but that's just too incredible a story. And it's so incredibly generous.
Yeah.
And it was great because I got along well with him because I had to, at the end when he comes down. So that's another link for Carson Teva, right? Rebels crew, Zeb, Chopper, and now C-3PO. Like, come on. But it was great because when he came, he came down and we were chatting because I was there to sort of like I had to chat with C-3PO, and so it was great just sort of kibitzing with him about what would we talk about, but also helping to guide him so he was safe because he said he couldn't. So we worked out some blocking so that I could help him get a visual reference of where he was, so he could be safe. It's one of these really spectacular things that I've been able to do because of Star Wars.
Yeah. And especially for you growing up on the originals, that must have just been like, it's like full circle. And like,
oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah. Cause like you see him on screen in A New Hope since the day it started. Like, well, actually,
right?
No, I'm sorry. The first line in Star Wars, actually.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Did you hear that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So
That's
it's
so cool. That is actually so cool. Now, I did have like some hot topic questions for you. Do
okay.
you have a favorite Star Wars movie?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
oh,
I
yeah, you do.
do.
Yeah,
Used to be Empire. Used to be
right.
Empire.
Used to be. Okay,
Uh,
so something
yeah,
changed.
used to be. Rogue One kind of knocked really
Yeah,
sort of it's neck and neck depending on how I feel. But like Rogue One was just what I loved about Rogue One was it gave the rebellion a sense of scope and scale.
yeah,
It wasn't just the Luke, Leia, and Han and Chewie. It was people were scared. They really took it from the adventurous sort of like serials, Flash Gordon-y type storytelling, swashbuckling storytelling into something
yeah.
that was just sort of like entrenched in realism, which is great. I mean, not to say that I want all of my Star Wars like that. It's not like there's no room for any other kinds of Star Wars and Andor. It's got to be realistic and gritty. No,
Yeah.
the universe is big enough to have that I like that aesthetic because it spoke to me because it was a different take on it. I've heard it referred to as grown-up Star Wars. Nah, it's a different Star Wars. It's got
Yeah.
different sort of scope to it and different grounding. Doesn't mean I'm like I saw the trailer for Skeleton Crew. Oh my god, I'm all up for that. I'm all
Yeah.
over that. I would love to see a Goonies like adventure like that. I
Yeah.
think there's room for that. I'm going to talk about Acolyte. I love the storytelling and the jumps in story
I
that
did too.
they did in
Yeah.
Acolyte. A lot of people want to dump on it because it was different, because of space witches, but it's like it's a galaxy. It's
Yeah.
huge. Why is it so hard to believe that there are all these different types of narratives that can be there? And if you don't like it, that's cool. All of Star Wars doesn't have to be everything for everyone. That's the beauty of life. You can pick and choose what you like and what you don't like,
Yeah.
and that's fine. So I'm gonna leave it at that. But like, that's why I really, really liked um, uh, Rogue One, and I love because they dovetailed elements of Star Wars into it too. When you see
Yeah.
a little bit more backstory, like oh my god, so like Red Squadron and Gold Squadron, they participated
Yeah.
in Scarif, right? Wedge Antilles, you could hear him in the background. You saw R2 and C3PO
Yeah.
on the base on the moon. Yavin 4. That sort of direct link from the end, like with Vader chasing the blood Tantive 4 all the way across. Like those are really nice sort of touches to it to just sort of go, it's a bigger universe than
Yeah.
what we thought. So there is that. And then again, like in a different medium as well. I think Mandalorian, that's why it was so you can have stories that don't have the main characters in it and still
Yeah.
have them thrive and be successful because it is a big galaxy.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's why Mando did really, really well because you didn't have to know every little detail about Star Wars to enjoy it,
100%.
right? And I think that's great storytelling too,
Yeah.
when you can do that. And if you want to do the deep cuts into it, yeah, by all means, watch this, and this, right? But you don't have to.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's that's so that would be like it's a tie between Rogue One and Empire. And yeah, yeah.
I think you're
Those
so
two neck and neck.
Yeah, I think you're so right about that as well. And I love that they're, especially now with all the recent new Disney Plus series, that's becoming more of a thing as well, that there are so many different varieties of Star Wars. Like you look at Rogue
Yeah.
One. Rogue One was very gritty, very like intense, very different. You saw a different side of things that you wouldn't see in like the originals and how it just ties in like directly to A New Hope. And then you expand that more with Andor. I mean, Andor is
Right.
it's dark and it's amazing,
Yeah.
And then you have Skeleton Crew, which looks just so much fun for families and just so nostalgic in a way for the Goonies, and just like it's that similar vibe. And they played Major Tom in the trailer, which was like so cool,
Right.
In Huttese, yeah,
In Huttese,
yeah,
right? That's brilliant.
yeah. And it's like you get all these different flavors of Star Wars and the Acolyte as well. To see a timeline that we've only read really through books, so it's like it's so cool. It's actually funny. Omid and Diana Lee in Osanto, they both said the same thing. That's their favorite film as well as you, Rogue One. They've also said Rogue One, yeah. So it's like you'll have something in common. It's so cool.
Well, and that's the other thing too, being able to meet Omid and Diana.
Yeah.
It's just again, it's just like, oh my God, I love your work. Like to be able to say, go up to them, and say, I love your work, and working with Mary Elizabeth Winstead and with Rosario who's like, oh my gosh, she's amazing. And then meeting Natasha Liu Bordelizo and Ivanka Sakno, Ivana, Shin Hati.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I just call it that. Sorry. But it's just like these big nerd moments because it's like we're all in the same universe.
Yeah.
And we don't have, I mean, and that's the thing. And like, to a person, they've all been so welcoming and so amazingly cool. You know?
Yeah. That's so cool. And it makes, again, going back, it just makes the experience for you even more magical.
Yeah.
My next question for you was, do you have a favorite Star Wars character? You can say yourself. It's cool. Like, don't worry.
Oh, no. I think that's cheating. If you say yourself, I think that's kind of cheating. So, so many. I mean, I honestly, I've always loved Han Solo.
Yeah.
Like, you know, Harrison Ford, that sort of roguish kind of guy who's a reluctant hero. He's not looking for adventure. He's just just want to like, look, I just want to get the hell out of here. And gets drawn in like the reluctant hero. I always really quite love that. You know, Mark Hamill kills it as Luke Skywalker, the farm boy who wants more and becomes a hero of the galaxy. I think when I was a little kid, I was a little bit more Luke, but as I got older, I was a little bit more Han. So I'd have to say, Han Solo.
That's awesome. Now, and like the last thing is here, you were in the recent show Murdoch Mysteries, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
Big congrats on that.
Thank you.
Do you have, now obviously I know you can only say so much and we'll leave it at that, but do you have, is there anything upcoming that, you know, fans can look forward to? Is there anything next for your acting career that, you know, that's in the works?
Yeah, I'm currently working on Avatar: The Last Airbender season 2. So that's why I'm in Vancouver. We're shooting season 2. We got seasons 2 and 3 greenlit, and so that's why I'm here. I'm working on that. So that's the next thing. That's what I'm working on right now, and will be working on for the foreseeable future. It takes a while for this, and so that's it. We're finishing off. I think Murdoch Mysteries is currently airing right now in Canada on CBC and CBC Gem, but it's also playing in the United States on Ovation. Which is a network there. You can always catch Avatar season 1 on Netflix. Kim's Convenience, he's on Netflix in the US and the rest of the world, I think. And also on Fuse TV, like a television network in the States, Fuse. But those are the next big things that are on the way, or that are airing, or on the way. So,
yeah. And is there anything you would like to share with Star Wars fans watching this?
No, just, you know, keep on keeping on. Remember, it's a big universe. Be supportive, be kind to each other. I know most of you are, like the majority of you are. And I hate having to even say this, but it's like Star Wars means so much to so many people. Remember, your experience, while it's cool if you can share that with other people, just because somebody has a different experience from yours doesn't make theirs any more or less valid than yours. So remember, diverse is a way of the universe. Diverse is a way of the Force. Be strong in it. Support each other. Love each other, because that is the true essence of what Star Wars really is. And may the Force be with you.
May the Force be with you. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks so much.